In the next hour, President Biden will meet with new British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the White House, and they will discuss the hot button issue of allowing Ukraine, perhaps, to use long-range weapons provided by Western allies to strike deep into Russian territory. Biden has been facing increasing pressure to loosen the restrictions. He's been facing it from Ukraine and also from folks here at home, and he's signaling a new openness to this. Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning that if those restrictions are lifted, it means NATO countries will be at war with Russia. And we're joined now by retired Army Major Mike Lyons to talk a little bit more about this. Major, how should the Biden administration consider that warning from Putin as they are looking at this possibility?
I think they have to take it seriously, and this is why. These weapons are strategic. They're going to give Ukraine somewhat of a tactical advantage at first, but from a strategic perspective, firing 150 miles inside of Russia does create supply and logistics issues that Russia will have to defend there. But more important, Putin knows that it's going to take the United States to do battle damage assessments and things with regard to these targets. So the United States and NATO countries will be all over the intel with regard to what these targets hit. And from Putin's perspective, that's a red line. And that really says NATO is now involved with this, and that would give him a chance to escalate. Now, we've crossed many red lines already with him, but this might be the final one that he says, look, the United States is definitely involved because at the level of intelligence it's giving back to Ukraine if it fires these rockets.
And then how might he respond, do you think?
Well, he can escalate in the region itself. He can mobilize more troops. I mean, Russia still maintains this advantage from a manpower perspective. We know that we've seen the Ukraine forces have gone into Russia. There was a counteroffensive now trying to get them back. I think Ukraine military is doing what they can to protect those forces there. But eventually, Russia has capacity to just grind down the troops that are there. They have this long-range capacity. They could also decide to go proxy. They can decide to get with the Iranians to try to increase funding to Shia militia groups that decide to attack U.S. forces in the Middle East. So the retaliation might not take place in country inside Europe, let's say, but it might take place outside as Russia continues to try to expand its influence.
So can you tell us what it would look like if Ukraine was using these longer range weapons? I mean, when Ukraine has used drones to attack inside of Russia, we do often see video of what happens of the targets. What would we be seeing in this case? What would the damage be? Where would it be? What would it look like?
Well, it would give them about 150 miles inside the Russian border based on where they could fire them from Ukraine, going after likely infrastructure targets. That would hurt really the civilian population, as well as some military targets there. But the Russians have done a good job of moving those assets back. For example, the air assets that launch many of the drones that they're sending towards Ukraine are well outside the limits of the HIMARS and the Storm Shadow and these rockets. So again, and we would be blind. We wouldn't know. We'd launch those and not be able to see them. There might be some cameras on. There might be some technology that's used. But the bottom line is that would come from the United States, from satellite shots to determine what exactly they hit. So again, they're not difference makers. None of these things that we're providing are actual difference makers. They're just more tools for the Ukraine military to use tactically, but they all have strategic implications.
So you don't see it changing the dynamics of the war?
No, I don't at all. It won't change Russia's calculation. It won't change anything. What'll change if they can get both sides to some kind of negotiation quickly. In fact, there's likely some political pressure to try to do this from our side. If you can get to an agreement here before our election, this administration can take a lot of credit for that, which is good. I think eventually we want to see a peace settlement there. The question is, what does that look like? But again, historically, countries that have greater capacity in wars of attrition end up winning those. As they try to grind each other's down. And right now, that's where we're still at. There's no real change in the front lines of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia.
All right, Major Mike Lyons, thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brianna.
Boris?